May I ask everyone here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for approval of the agenda, do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda this evening?
We have an addendum agenda, Mr. President.
Okay, and with that addendum, I need a motion on approval of tonight's agenda. So moved. Mr. Darrow, Mrs. Kalinowski, roll please.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
President McClellan?
Yes. And now to discussion items, Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClellan. We'd like to begin this evening with a conversation regarding a preschool update because of its integration into our school district effective with the 2017-18 school district. We've asked Mrs. Unger, the Pre-K Early Learning Center principal, and Mr. Emery, Director of Elementary Education, to be present this evening to update you and give you information regarding the upcoming preschool program and curriculum. Mrs. Unger?
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyers, Dr. Troyer, Treasurer Jenkins, and the board. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you about our preschool program, and we're very excited for the implementation of it. Enrollment is going very well. We're almost at full capacity. Of course, a lot of that is always about the special ed population as well, our special ed students. Our program is a fully integrated program serving students that are both peer models. Those are our typically developing students that are not on an IEP, and also our students that are identified special needs. The program is designed to meet the continuum of services as outlined by the Ohio Department of Education. So that's providing many different experiences for our students throughout the continuum of services and the continuum of services throughout the school system in their least restrictive environment. We want to share with you today one of our biggest tasks, which was adopting a curriculum that would serve our students. So we believe that the adoption of the Big Day curriculum by Houghton Mifflin of preschool will ensure the implementation of a guaranteed and viable curricula for increased outcomes for all students, and that was our task. So I just want to go through our process very briefly. We created a committee that brought in the perspective of not only early learning staff, but also the kindergarten staff, so we could make sure that our outcomes were aligned. And each member of the team was slated with a different focus when we were reviewing each of the curriculums. So we went through a vetting process for multiple curriculums, approximately 5. So we had different focus. One was the rigor of the curriculum. What would we be offering students on a day-to-day basis? The stretch. We have kids, students that will be enrolled in the program as 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. So we needed to make sure that this curriculum would meet the needs of all of those students and the appropriate developmental opportunities. We needed to ensure that the program was also comprehensive. So it meets every domain of early learning and also meets the requirements of what's called the Step Up to Quality. This is a quality rating system by the Ohio Department of Education that every early childhood program receiving state or federal funds has to go through. So we will be monitored through ODE in the Step Up to Quality system. A heavy focus on literacy. Embedded assessments to make sure that our students are making great progress. And we wanted to make sure that there was a good partnerships with families, that there was a home to school and school to home connection. So each person would have a certain area of that curriculum that they would be looking at, and we would all come to the table and kind of rate the curriculum. So I want to focus on 2 areas that our team found to be most impressive with this. One was the social emotional piece of this curriculum. And this is an initiative that our kindergarten team is also taking on. Actually, we spent the entire day today working on our positive behavior intervention systems, the PBIS within our school with our kindergarten team. And we actually used our preschool curriculum as part of the model. And how we could have that shared between that. And we also are familiar with what's happening at the primary building, so there would be some fluidity. But our biggest focus was on the literacy piece of the curriculum. The curriculum has a strong focus on addressing the essential components of literacy, and that happens each and every day. This is the foundation for early reading and to become strong readers, but also the love of reading. It provides this through rich literature that is familiar to students and families. So one of the items that we loved about this curriculum is that it provides embedded storybooks that are familiar with students, but also familiar with our families. We believe in repetition and that students need to hear storybooks over and over and over again, but we could also draw out the pieces of that storybook that are important for what we're trying to teach at that point in time to a 3, a 4, and a 5-year-old. So if a student attends our program for more than 1 year, hearing that story would not be something that would be detrimental. We would want them to hear it again, and we would draw different aspects of it out. So we just appreciated the opportunity to share with you what we found. Big Day does not require any type of board action, but our team felt it was important that you were familiar with what we plan to implement each and every day next year for our earliest learners. At this point in time, I welcome any questions that you have about the preschool curriculum. And
Thank you. I just had one
yeah,
quick question. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned the step up to quality.
Mm-hmm.
Will we have a current rating? That's a 1 through 5-star rating, I believe.
yeah.
Do we start with no rating?
Every program comes in as a 3-star until you are fully evaluated. But it's not a 3-star that's necessarily advertised. Once you go through the process, whatever star you get will then be, you get like a banner and they send you an official letter that says you, with ultimately our goal being a 5-star, we won't settle for anything less. And we have the systems in place currently, so this shouldn't be a far stretch for us.
So we'll be evaluated next year.
Our hope is for next year. The state is very far behind on their reviewing of programs. I have many contacts at the Department of Ed. And when I've asked, they said at the very end of next year or potentially the beginning of the following year, we could anticipate that licensure reviewer coming in. We will have to be licensed to operate at the beginning of the school year, but that is separate from the step up to quality.
Great. Thank you. And then the second question, you mentioned the Houghton Mifflin Big Day curriculum. Will that be, you said it will be changing for kindergarten as well?
No, this is a preschool curriculum, but we wanted to make sure that the curriculum and what the teachers would be implementing every day would make children successful for their kindergarten year.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure, and we wanted to make sure that our teachers that were vetting the curriculum and as our teachers come in, they are familiar with kindergarten outcomes because we want to provide that stretch. Again, we say 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, but we know we have 5-year-olds coming in that are at a kindergarten level. So our teachers familiar with where they need to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it looks exciting.
Thank you, Mrs. Unger. We'll come visit as soon as they arrive. They're really cute. I've seen them registering. They are. They're 3. You ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Next is board policy. In your public content for the agenda this evening, you see there are 10 policies with proposed revisions and 1 policy for a policy addition. These are all within the 2000 series of Board of Education policy within our school district, which relates to programming. The programming recommendations this evening are being made in reference to changes in Ohio Revised Code, federal, state, or statutory changes, or administrative code changes. And then in the special education series, within the 2000s, the policies that we're specifically bringing forward this evening deal with free and appropriate public education requirements for students with special needs. So I'm not going to walk you through each one because you've had access to them. I'm happy to talk about specific ones if you have questions related to them, but the state performance indicator versus the curriculum, the special education series, the update on interscholastic athletics, and then the selection of instructional materials or adoption of textbooks just meet the new statutory requirements for what changed in ORC. So most of it, honestly, is perfunctory because we're just incorporating the ORC element into the policy. So these are moving through the system, as I've explained to you before. This is 11 tonight and probably 150 more to go. So we're working through them at each meeting, but you have a whole set this evening. I'm trying not to give you more than 12 at any meeting, given the amount of reading that's required.
Thank you.
Good with me. Any questions? Okay.
Great. Next, Dr. Troyer, I've asked to present as the Assistant Superintendent the collective bargaining agreement overview for our new agreement for the Plain Local Education Association. Dr. Troyer?
Thank you, Superintendent Sanders and members of the board. We have a new collective bargaining agreement that is good for 3 years, so we're very happy about that, 2017 through 2020. It's a proposed collective bargaining agreement at this point in time. It has been ratified by the teachers, and so it now will take action by the Board of Education. So just to share a few highlights from the agreement. First of all, insurance is one place where there were quite a few changes made. One of the most significant changes is that the traditional health insurance format of a PPO is no longer going to be available to our employees. Instead, there will be a choice of 2 high deductible health plans with health savings accounts affiliated with them. There will also be an incentive to opt out of the district health insurance, and we believe that there will be an overall reduction in healthcare costs beginning in January as a result of these changes that are in the collective bargaining agreement related to insurance. Moving on then to salary, we incorporated into the collective bargaining agreement a new salary schedule that has standardized steps that we believe will benefit the district in future years in terms of managing costs. There is a $1,500 academic achievement stipend that's available to all teachers each year that the district reaches the board selected target for student academic achievement. And then finally, there's a base wage increase of 1% for each of the 3 years of the contract. In addition to salary and insurance, there were a couple of language things that were changed. There are not a lot of things that were changed around working conditions or language, but I'll highlight a couple of the ones that were made. One is that there was a good bit of discussion about class composition. That is, as we cluster students into classrooms so that they can have their needs met, and it makes it more manageable for us if intervention specialists and other related service personnel are able to work with groups of students in a single classroom versus having them scattered throughout every classroom. So we had a good bit of discussion about that. There's a goal of students with these specially identified needs not being more than 33% of any given classroom. That's a goal. And we will be establishing a class composition committee. That's a joint committee between the administration and the association to continue studying this issue. One of the things, for example, that we'll look at is in terms of high school courses and the way that those courses are offered and the way they're designed and whether how that impacts enrollment of different types of students in different courses. In addition, we also had quite a bit of discussion about class size. As you know, when we had a reduction in force a couple of years ago, our class sizes went up. In the years since then, we have been able to gradually begin reducing those class sizes again to get them back to be a little bit more close to what it used to be years ago. But our class size goals are for grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, a goal of up to 22 students per class. For grades 4 through 6, a goal of up to 25 students per class. And then for 7 through 12, 28 students per class. And then classes like the performing arts and wellness, you might have different numbers than that, depending on what the class is. A choir class, for example, might have much larger numbers because of the size of some of our choirs. So that will vary. And then we also put in place a process for teachers to use if they have concerns about class size. So if we notify them at the end of the school year what their tentative class teaching schedule will be and their tentative class sizes, they then have an avenue at the beginning of the school year if they have any concerns about that to address those concerns. And then finally, in terms of language, we added some language around College Credit Plus. College Credit Plus is a program that allows students to earn college credit while they're in high school. We offer many of these classes here on our campus. We have found that a lot of our students, especially if they're only taking 1 or 2 College Credit Plus courses in a given year, prefer to stay on our campus versus traveling to OSU or some other place. Certainly there are some who will take their entire senior year, for example, on a college campus, but most stay here. So we have agreed that by March 1st of each year, we'll identify which College Credit Plus courses will be available. We'll make sure there's training available for the teachers who will be teaching those courses. And then we have also collective bargaining agreement also includes an additional stipend for teachers who hold the qualifications to teach one of those courses. To teach a College Credit Plus course, you must meet Ohio Board of Regents criteria. And so it's more than just having a teaching license. For example, it requires either a master's degree in the content area or a certain number of credit hours in that content area. So to encourage teachers to do that, we are making available a stipend annually for teachers who meet those higher qualifications and who teach at least one College Credit Plus course. So those are some of the highlights from the collective bargaining agreement. There were other more minor changes that are more internal operational things like staff directories and different things like that. But in terms of the substantive changes, those are our highlights. So I'll be glad to open it up for questions that you might have, and either Superintendent, the Treasurer, or I will be able to answer them.
Any questions, guys? Any commentary from anybody on the process or on the proposal? Can I say anything or no?
Let's see. Well, I wouldn't wish the process on anyone. Nonetheless, a year ago, we laid out with great clarity what it is we're trying to accomplish here in New Albany with our schools. The goal of achieving the best academic and developmental outcome, creating a culture of accountability that achieves the best educational or academic and developmental outcomes for each student. And those goals have really permeated everything we do here. And so as we began discussions with our professional association, with our professional faculty, that was always our goal. And when you look at the changes that are embedded in this new agreement, I think it really represents a substantive change in direction and commitment on the part of our professional faculty to these very same goals. You know, when we look at our faculty, we look at our teachers, they're not just employees, they're members of our community. And so when I look at the changes in the agreement, it represents meaningful change in the direction of being part of the community, even to the degree of looking at insurance and saying, you know, how is that consistent with it? Well, the people who live in New Albany, the overwhelming majority of people who live here are living under insurance plans very similar to what we are now offering, to high deductible health plans with health savings accounts. The stipend for achievement of educational outcomes is, again, very consistent with how members of our community live and work. You know, when they do well, when their organizations, their employers do well, they do well. And so the very same thing now exists here. And so those outcomes, I think, really represent important changes in the working relationship and a better relationship between and among our professional faculty, our staff, members of the administration, and the community. So I'm really very pleased with those changes in direction and appreciate the work that went into making that happen.
Yeah, I think we as a board worked very hard to come up with a contract agreement with with the association that would be generous to them, but also still fair to the community and the taxpayers. And I think that's what we've been able to achieve, and we were able to achieve it together. One of the things, Phil talks very bluntly about not wishing the process on anybody. I think anytime you're involved in a negotiation, those things are they're designed for some conflict. I mean, if you're buying a house, you're in a negotiation. It's not necessarily fun. But I do want to give some credit to Mr. Joe Armpriester, who is here this evening, who is the PLE president, who we kept a very open dialogue, and they listened to us, we listened to them. And again, I think this contract shows, again, a shared commitment between all of us to do what's best for the long-term health and well-being of our school district. This agreement, we believe, is going to provide a lot of financial stability for our district, which is something that we know the community was asking for. And we'll probably have more to share on that in days to come, but it's allowing us to have that financial stability, but at the same time still recognizes the contribution and dedication of our teachers. I mean, one of the things we talked about in the process was the fact that we know that the teachers are the ones that we count on every day to deliver the academic and developmental experiences to our kids that we expect, that we aligned with our statement of purpose. We want the best academic and developmental outcomes for our kids, and the teachers play a major role in that. And so we recognize, and I think this contract recognizes that. Again, though, at the same time, being fiscally responsible and aligning with our continuous improvement plan and goals. So it was a long process. It was not always the most exciting process, but it was one that at the end of the day, we all came together as members of this community, all of us members of this community, to put forward a proposal that, again, we believe recognizes the value that the teachers have to our kids, but also is one that is going to show our community that we are being very fiscally responsible. So really, really pleased with the contract. Thankful that the folks at PLE have agreed to it, and look forward to agreeing to it as a board tonight.
I'd like to thank Joe and his team as well. I am thrilled with the agreement that we reached, and I feel like it really demonstrates a partnership between all of us. And I think we can do great things to solve problems for the community and the school district when we work together. And I really feel like this demonstrates us working well together. And that's a real credit to you, Joe. So, and the team that was with you negotiating. And I hope the teachers feel like it's fair and that it demonstrates that we really value their contributions and are also, mindful of trying to solve problems for our community. And I think that it's a strong agreement for everyone. So thank you.
I'd like to weigh in, and I could get in a ramble here because I'm really excited about where we are. I look back where we were come in the last 18 months or so, and the energy that's in the district, even before this contract that was resolved, with Michael as our leader, the leaders who are working with him, and our professional teaching staff who are always trying to take care of our kids. So I'm really excited about the direction that we have been going in, but now that we've got this resolved and we have a 3-year contract, and we've negotiated, and I know, again, thank you to you, Joe, but also to Phil and John, who and our other leaders who've led this. I got lots of phone calls, but I didn't have to be in the trenches. But I know it's hard because I know negotiations can be challenging, and you can have a transactional negotiation where you walk away from each other and don't have to deal with each other. You have a relationship negotiation, and I think we've got a real relationship negotiation that can only improve with time. And so I really what I wanted to say was, we get involved because we want our schools to be great and continue to improve, but we also have been so mindful of the financial challenges and some of the highs and lows we've been through. And I think this sets us on a course with the provisions that have been laid out here for achieving some of that financial sustainability, but also really a 3-year window here to let's go do great things together. And I want to, maybe I'm getting out here too far on a limb, but how do we continue to communicate, beyond the contract and beyond things happening in the classroom day to day as a community and as our professional teaching staff? Because I know that this community will throw its arms around education. It's done it already. It will continue to do it. I want to be a champion for that. I want us to have the schools that we know we can have here, and we've got very good schools. They can be great. They can be phenomenal in comparison to to other schools around Ohio and around the country. We've got that kind of resource here with interested parties who will get involved. So I open the invitation to personally do anything I can. I love to go rile things up. I do, and I want to do it in a very positive way, and I would just encourage it to please anybody in the teaching community or yourself to reach out, because I love it when the community throws its weight behind something, and I think we've got a real opportunity here with this behind us. And I'm so glad to be sitting here talking to you, Joe, as opposed to when we were talking 18 months ago. That was not fun. This is going to be fun going forward. So thank you all, everybody, for putting this together, and I look forward to the energy and continuing the positive momentum in the district.
Well, I don't think any of you guys left me anything to say. So I'll just thank everyone that was involved in the process and just echo that this really does feel like a win-win. Importantly, really being able to, as Paul was, I think, speaking to, make sure that the progress that we're making is sustainable to supporting our kids in the classroom, but it really does feel like a win-win for the teachers and the community. So I think it's a great thing.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Joe, but do you want to say anything?
I'm going to vote first.
Wait, do we have, I know that trust here.
Did he sign up for
It's not public
participation?
participation yet. Sorry. It's not public participation.
Fair enough. We'll get to business. Actually, we have more business before that, but we'll get there. Capital improvements.
Ms. Jenkins and I are here this evening to continue our conversation related to permanent improvements within our school district. As the board will recall, we've been working on this steadily, really for the last 2 years, but hardcore in the last 3 months in the school district and conversations with you about coming up with a plan for the future related to permanent improvements and the capital needs across our school district. We're going to walk you through the updates of the work that we've done since our last conversation here at a Board of Education meeting based upon prior direction from you to go back and look at trying to come up with a 5-year plan to complement what historically has been done. So we're going to walk you through that this evening at a very high level, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Ms. Jenkins?
So we wanted to start with a little bit of history, and I know we've talked about this, but for those who may be viewing this online at a later date or now. So in 2009, the permanent improvement levy that had been in collection was not renewed by taxpayers. That was a conscious decision. That wasn't a negative vote. The board at the time believed that we're part of the, you're in the recession and we had some other operating needs, and so felt that because there was a balance in that account that they could allow that to expire. And then the district did use those funds gradually over a period of years, and in 2013, 14, those balances expired. And so that's about the time that you would see in the 5-year forecast, if you look back, that we started to build more and more of those capital or permanent improvement expenditures into the general fund budget. So the 2009 permanent improvement levy funds are now depleted. The 2012 bond issue that was passed included the new building, 2-8 Learning Center. I think it's an intermediate now. The intermediate building. So that was included, and then infrastructure around the school district and other permanent improvements. So we did a lot of work with parking lots and sidewalks and those things. We did have about $652,000 left in that account, that bond residual, but after we pay for the track of $173,000, we will have $480,388 left in the bond residual account. That could be used for permanent improvements around the district. We're trying to really protect that, to use that for things like the track or things that are really big. It could help with the high school roofs, but as you saw at the last meeting, we're looking at least $2.2 million there, so it's only going to do some piece of it. And then to talk about today, so currently we're spending approximately over the 5-year period an average of about $1.3 million on different capital needs or permanent improvements within the district, which includes technology, buses, and then just needs around the district, concrete replacement, patching or repairing some pieces and parts of some of the parking lots that had not been touched during the construction.
So in my former role within the school district as the Chief Operations and Strategic Development, back in 2015, we created and published a 10-year projection for the school district in the specific areas of capital improvement for areas that constitute permanent improvement in our school district. To be eligible for a permanent improvement classification, the asset has to have a life cycle greater than 5 years. So that then falls into the categories of the roofs, the asphalt, concrete work, specific equipment that we purchase for the custodial staff, like an industrial vacuum cleaner, should last greater than 5 years. A tractor that we use on the basically for plowing purposes or snow plows or trucks should last greater than 5 years. All those things become a capital asset for permanent improvement within our school district because their life cycle is greater than 5 years. So in 2015, we created a 10-year plan that on average projected expenditures of $1.9 million annually within the school district to sustain our school district for permanent improvement. In prior conversations with the Board of Education, you asked us to then go back because it had been over 18 months since we actually sat down and did the continued analysis. And just because something was expected to have an end of life cycle event, did it really happen? So we've gone back through and actually truncated this into a 5-year plan. And you have this as a handout because I recognize it's small on the screen. But we'll post this as a PDF on our website as well, so persons of interest that want to see it can actually look at the physical document. We've put in the major categories or classification. So we start with school bus replacement, and you can see this is front-loaded in fiscal years 18, 19. Dominantly, it was 17, 18, now it's 18 because of the EPA grant that was received by the school district. So we had to fast track our bus replacement schedule based upon the $125,000 grant plus or minus that the district received. So after the first year of fiscal year 18, where we're purchasing actually 3 buses, we then go to 1 bus in 19, 1 bus in 20, 1 bus in 21, and 2 buses in 22 based upon the life cycle of the current fleet. So we've updated these numbers based upon current reality of what's happening in the district as you had requested. The maintenance vehicles, you don't see a replacement. There's 2 of them in 2022, so we don't have any replacement in the first 4 years based upon our current work that we've done this last fiscal year in the school district. We attempt to trade those every 5 years to retain on state term contract because we do purchase vehicles through the state term contracts that are negotiated at the state level or better if the local merchant is willing to do that with us. Van replacement, this is dominantly for athletics and or transportation of students with special needs. So you see there's no replacement until 2021, again, based upon the life cycle replacement that we've already done. The middle school gymnasium floor is scheduled in cycle rotation, that this is its year for complete sanding and refinishing. So you see an estimated expenditure. High school sanding is not due within the first 5 years. So it doesn't appear in here, it's accounted for, but it's not part of the next 5 years. It actually falls in 2023. So you don't see that in our 5-year replacement. There is a maintenance line item after the track resurfacing that takes place to basically protect the asset. We put in an estimate based upon conversations with contractors, but that ultimately will provide for continued life cycle to ensure that we get the 13 to 15 years that we hope to get out of our new track, even though it has a 10-year life cycle. The preventative maintenance matters. The weight room equipment has actually been requested for the last 3 years in the school district for replacement. It is a significant expenditure to rehab the entire weight room. So we've split it into 2 fiscal years based upon the equipment. We have done minor replacements, repairs, clearly to maintain the safety requirements, but this is an overhaul for replacement on the pieces of equipment and or new equipment that's being requested through the trainers and or coaches within the department. Sound is for the stadium. So if you've been to a recent football game, you've probably, or a track meet that we haven't hosted because we haven't had a track, but you would hear muffled sounds in the speakers. So we're looking to actually fix that problem. When we replace the speakers at the stadium, they should last more than 5 years. So it technically, although it's less than $25,000 to $10,000 expenditure, constitutes a permanent improvement ask. The roof is the single most significant expenditure that we're forecasting in fiscal year 19. The current estimates based upon the presentation you heard at your last board meeting were $2.2 million in a worst case situation. We will continue to analyze that. Well, we built it in just to see what that number would look like if we actually have to incorporate that into a single year or a multi-year project, depending on how we would choose to bid it at the high school for roof replacement. Then you walk through the series of the other roofs, and I'm not going to read each line item, but you can see how they fall within the actual school district. For the early learning center, the middle school, the primary school, what happens in each specific year. We tried to balance those based upon what is actually happening, based upon the roof assessments that were done in the report or the core samples that were actually born. After the high school, the current 2-5 elementary school that's becoming the primary school in the fall is the single most at risk, aside from the administrative office, where Mount Carmel joins us as the other half of the building. We became the owners of that facility in December, and based upon the core sample that was actually done a month ago, we've discovered that it is actually in greater disrepair right now than the primary school. So the primary school and the administrative office are competing with each other to determine which roof is the worst compared to the high school. The high school has won hands down, but the other two are not far behind. You see domestic boiler replacements versus the actual chiller maintenance or replacement. We've done chiller maintenance rather than replacement based upon the assessment with the contractors and conversations with Mr. Strigley. You'll recall in the prior documents, we actually showed a $280,000 expenditure to replace the chiller. Now we show a $50,000 maintenance line item that we think we can get it through the next 5 years to extend its life cycle further than what already exists within our school district. Domestic boiler replacements appear next, specifically so you can see it. And then the next line item that has the single most greatest variance from the prior 18-month analysis is actually the one prior to the general improvement funding, and it's specifically for technology infrastructure replacement and new. And you know, in conversations that I've shared with you, we have significant issues in technology across our school district, and it's not because of anything our current personnel have done. We have end-of-life cycle equipment that, right or wrong, was purchased off of lease from former school districts that were at end of life. So they arrived to New Albany as an end of life purchase, and we've tried to maintain end of life equipment. So we have significant issues in technology. Mr. Voss and his team do a yeoman's job every single day of making things happen across the school campus. We're slowly making progress to improve the infrastructure. Last summer, we did bandwidth specifically at the middle or the high school and high school and what will become the early learning center. This summer, we're doing bandwidth for Wi-Fi upgrade at the middle school. And we're starting that rotation to take advantage of what we can get back through other E-rate advantages. However, beyond that, we have significant technology needs across the school campus. So you will see that we have significantly increased the projection for technology to try to right the ship, to go back and put us where we need to meet the academic developmental needs daily within the classroom for kids and how teachers use technology across our school campus. So you will see that it's an increased expenditure. We're estimating $1 million annually to get us back to where we need to be. The general improvement funding at the bottom, you see these are annual requirements pretty much across the board. There's a couple of variances in specific years where we know we have to do something that is major in that specific year. For instance, when you look at interior finishes, it includes painting, restroom, and partitions. You will see in 2019, we're projecting $150,000 expenditure instead of a $50,000 expenditure. And the reason for that is to paint the high school. The high school has not been painted on the interior since it has opened. It has been patchwork. So it will be time. And from my estimation, to actually paint the internal portion, that's why you see a significant increase in 2019. It's the estimate to actually paint the interior of New Albany High School. That will not be a small job. That will be a significant job that will take time because it's labor intensive based upon its size. So that's the estimate that we have back in conversations with Mr. Strigley. The other elements you see for general roofing, the preventative maintenance, once we actually fix the roofs, you will see a decrease in those numbers from what we're currently spending in the school district today, based upon ultimately then continuing the preventative maintenance to extend their life cycle. The other pieces and parts are represented. I will point out the other one that is different is safety and security at the bottom. There is a significant expenditure we're making this year to actually install the new Meraki cameras that you approved at the last board meeting. There's a cabling requirement that'll come shortly, probably to the next board meeting, so that they're installed in preparation for the start of the new school year in August. But when you go through each column and you look at the totals that we're now estimating for the 5-year update, You can see on the next slide, as Ms. Jenkins will indicate, that we have an average cost per year for the total of what we're showing, and the average in the 5 years is approximately $2.5 million. We currently have 1.3 in the 5-year forecast that we're spending out of the general revenue fund. Ms. Jenkins?
So how do we pay for this? We've come up with a couple of options. We've talked about this a few different times, but we do have, it is actually, I verified 2.5 mils of bond debt millage that will be rolling off in December. And so the district could choose to convert that entire 2.5 mils to PI. That would bring in about $2.5 million in revenue to the district. So, and then of course you have $2.5 million of expenses estimated each year, which would end up saving the general fund $41,000. Because we wouldn't have to put the whole $1.3 million in the general fund. So savings to the, I'm sorry, we'd still have to take about $40,000 out of the general fund. So we would save about $1.2 million. That is if the district decided to do that. The other option that we've talked about is that perhaps instead of asking for the whole 2.5 mils, you ask for 1.5 mils. That would generate about $1.5 million, leaving a gap of $1 million, $1,041,000 that we would still have to make up out of the general fund. You would still show a savings to the general fund of about $258,000 each year. This would also, this option would also, not that we wouldn't do this with the other option, but would also make sure, you know, to, for us to continue to look at what are those expenses. Do we really need to make them in this year? Is it something that we can do some other kind of maintenance to whichever piece of equipment and push it off to another year, give it a little more life? So those were the two options that Michael and I are bringing forward to the district or to the board. We could continue to do what we're doing, which is spend approximately $1.3 million out of the 5-year forecast general fund. But you can see we have that lag, and at some point you're going to push off maintenance so far that it becomes such a big burden. We wouldn't have the money in general fund to fix those things, like the roof at the high school, the roofs at the high school. So the next steps for the board, we hope that you will discuss this and talk about our update this evening. Then the next steps to proceed, should the board choose to proceed with a permanent improvement levy. If you're electing to say pursue the 2.5, either one, or the 1.5 mil, it would be for a 5-year period. That way you can come back every 5 years to look and see how did you spend the money, what are the needs going forward for the next 5. You would have to pass a resolution of necessity at the next board meeting on June 26th. That resolution is just you saying, we have a need. Please, county auditor, let us know. Can you please certify the rate and the amount that we would collect from this 1.5 mil, say, permanent improvement levy? They send those verifications back to us. Then the board would have to choose to pass another levy or another resolution by the end of July, and that is the resolution to proceed. That's the resolution that would actually put the ballot language, put the levy on the ballot as ballot language, and you would see the language and everything. Because it has to be at the Board of Elections by August 9th. So that's the timeline. So at this point, questions, comments, discussion, because we would have to bring the resolution of necessity back to you in 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks.
So just for clarification, we are taking $1.3 million out of our general revenue fund on an annual basis to pay for permanent improvement projects.
Yes, so when you take all of the permanent improvements that are not related to technology or busing or transportation related, you add everything else for general maintenance across the school campus, the concrete, the asphalt, the doors, all that stuff. It adds up to 1.3 million between those 3 different types of expenditures.
So what would happen, so if there was not a PI levy that was put on the ballot, you're either going to need to just keep trying to figure out how to do it at 1.3, or we would have to look at
You'd have to,
pulling.
you'd take money from your bottom line. You would have to take really your ending cash balance and decrease it. If you had a 2.2, like if the roofs all failed at the high school tomorrow and we had to make a $2.2 million expenditure, we don't have that currently as a line item within the general revenue fund. You would have to take it out of your existing cash balance.
So, sorry, were you gonna say something? I thought I heard somebody. So if we, if that happened, then you're talking about the bottom line shrinking, which could have an effect on our 5-year forecast, which then could have an effect on when we would either need to make potentially further cuts in the district or go back to the ballot for an operating levy.
It would also impact the amount that you go back for.
Right.
So if the board chose, if you decide that cutting isn't the option and we're going to go back on the ballot, it's probably a higher millage rate because you don't have those balances any longer.
I think beyond that, the other comment that I would make, and we didn't put it in the presentation, we've talked about it with you in the past. Part of it's the reality as a school district, we have to face that there's going to be continued maintenance necessary across the school campus. Our buildings are going to continue to age. The roofs are going to continue to fail. The $2.2 million report that we received at the last board meeting was a surprise. To the level of extent of the actually deterioration of the roofs at the high school was surprising. But we can't control that. So now we have to respond to it. And our response really comes down to short-term versus long-term. We believe there's a long-term solution that's necessary. We're not looking to collect money for the sake of collecting money. We need to collect the money so it's a protection, because PI money has specific things under Ohio Revised Code that you're allowed to expend the dollars on. So if we would collect this as a permanent improvement fund within the school district through a PI levy, it is protected and can only be used for the improvement of capital assets on our school campus. And we're not saying fix it for the sake of fixing it. We extend the life cycle on any asset in the school district as long as we can. But we know there are defined issues that have to be addressed. And we have a responsibility to bring that forward to figure out how are we going to fund this moving forward when you have a $2.2 million expenditure facing you. That's currently not part of the budget forecast.
So question on timing clarification. Doing a board resolution at our next meeting to start the process does not obligate us to put a levy on the ballot. Even doing resolution number 2 that allows us to put it on the ballot doesn't obligate. That puts it on the ballot? Okay, so in August, so we would have, so doing a resolution the end of this month would allow us to continue to evaluate the necessity, the amount, whether we want to do it at all, through to the end of August.
If you want to do, so when you do the resolution of necessity, which is the first resolution, you have to have a resolution for the option that you want to put on the ballot. So if you want to be able to continue to talk about 1.5 versus 2 versus 2.5 mils, you would have to pass a resolution for each one of those things. And then at the second option would be you've chosen which of those things, and that's the one you move forward with. And that's the one that would actually have ballot language, and that's the one we send to the Board of Elections to put that on. So if the board wants to continue talking about millage amounts, we'd need to have 3, 4, 5, however many different millage resolutions so that you could pass all of them.
And are there any rules around the millage amounts that are allowable, or can you pick, I don't want, not arbitrary, but if we were to identify that the right number would be 1.1 mils or 1.75 mils, are you able to choose any number?
Permanent improvement in the state of Ohio is less than 10. So in your resolution language, when it cites the requirements pursuant to statute, when you select the millage amount, it has to be less than 10 mils. So it can be any number to any decimal fraction that you would like. And when you send that, that's the purpose of why it has to happen from your first resolution. it goes to the county auditor's office, and they'll certify for you that this millage amount, or whichever millage amount you would like, they'll tell you the exact dollar amount that it will generate, because they have to certify that to you so that you agree that you know before you pass the second resolution that that is the amount of money that would be collected.
Well, the good news is we're not talking about anything near 10 mils.
We're actually telling you tonight from our perspective, we believe it's fiscally responsible for us as a school district to consider 1.5. And then put the onus back on the school district that still will not generate the total amount that's on average in the 5 years, but then holds us accountable to basically trying to be prudent with the dollars, extending life cycles as long as we can, as we currently do within the school district, and only ask for what we believe we actually are going to need.
And just for further clarification, this 2.5 mils.
Will roll off December 31st.
It rolls up, and how long that's one of the original bond, right?
So they're laddered. It's not one specific bond, it's just millage that's collected to pay several
bonds.
different
Yeah,
bonds.
okay.
So,
But either way, currently, the taxpayers in this community are paying the equivalent of 2.5 mils right now.
Correct.
That in December goes away. And so if what we're asking, if what we end up asking for, if this is what we would do, which would be 1.5 mils, come January of 2018, the taxpayers in this community are still going to would be paying less in taxes than they currently do.
It's no new tax with the reduction, but yet you're funding a permanent improvement solution for the school district.
and
It's
there's-
not only no new tax, but it's a reduction in tax.
It is a reduction plus no new tax.
If we collected the 2.5 mils, and we didn't need all of that money over the 5-year forecast, that just stays in our permanent improvement fund.
Correct.
Correct. It's exactly what happened with the 2009 permanent improvement. So they collected those funds for a 5-year period and had a balance. Let that expire, didn't use it then, so the district was still able to use it over several years. So it doesn't just go away. we don't spend it for the sake of spending it.
And in the conversations Becky and I had, we think it's prudent on behalf of the administration standing here to make the recommendation to you and at the board, not to go to the taxpayer and ask for a permanent improvement levy that basically is then forever. We're not asking for a forever tax related to capital. We think we should be held accountable to the 5-year plan and ultimately come back to our taxpayers and say, this is working and this is what we have and this is what we spend it on. We need to continue it, so we're going to ask you to renew it, or we need to decrease the millage, or we need to increase the millage based upon whatever new information is available at that time.
If we collected the whole 2.5 mils, what's the impact on our 5-year forecast? Do you know?
You can take the 1.2 million out each year over the 5-year period.
1.3.
Well, it's 1.258.
Yeah. The difference, you're right. We said approximately.
And
So
does
that's
that,
each year for the 5 years.
But if you end up needing to spend all of that money, then you're potentially looking at, and let's just say we go through the 5 years, but then you're potentially looking at a 5-year forecast should a renewal of that permanent improvement not happen, there'd be savings that really aren't there in the forecast. So I would just, I wouldn't necessarily look at it as a way to just save forecast money.
So if you went through the money and you weren't able to renew it, then all of those costs have to come back into the 5-year forecast. So
so it makes us feel like we have more money than we really have.
Right.
potentially,
We don't want to do that.
That's not a good feeling.
I would say that you would still appropriate some portion each year.
As a
As
safeguard.
kind of like what you do now. I don't know that I would do the whole 1.3 if it's not necessary, but some portion of that you would still want to appropriate. And at the end of the year, you can still always take those unspent funds and transfer them into permanent improvement, which is what we've been doing for the last, I think, 3 years.
We can't, and we don't know. I mean, this is our best guesstimate based upon the current work within the school district, but you also have to realize, just like at home, things are going to happen that we didn't predict are going to happen. Last winter was the water pipes at the middle school, and we lost hot water for over 3.5 months. We still maintained heat in the building. We were very creative in a solution, but then that resulted in a summer repair of about $185,000 that we hadn't anticipated. If the chiller goes tomorrow, and there's no wood over here, let's pretend this is. If the chiller goes tomorrow, it's a $280,000 expenditure that we don't want. So those types of things, we know, we've looked at these items at your request to go back and brought in the manufacturers and said, we know this is end of life cycle, but it still works and it works just fine. What else can we do in preventative maintenance to continue to extend its life cycle? But if it blows tomorrow, I don't know that today's standing here, and we have to face that. Right now, our resource for that is the $400 plus or minus $1,000 that's still available in bond residual that we're trying to protect for those very things that might happen, or the general revenue fund for additional cash expenditure that comes off the bottom line.
So I will be bringing back some resolutions to you.
Well, you actually have a
At the next
draft in
meeting,
your
so
folder, so.
You have a draft
We
of
gave it
one.
to you this evening based upon our work. So in our current work, we believe option number 2 is feasible as a potential solution for the school district. So we've drafted the language that would be necessary for a board resolution. A draft of that resolution is in your folder. And we will follow up with you individually to have continued conversation over the course of the next 2 weeks to determine the status of bringing forward a resolution to the board on June 26th for your consideration.
You may have already said this, but if I could just clarify, on the 26th, if we pass a resolution or multiple resolutions to give ourselves options, are we then committed to putting one of them on?
No.
When do we
Well,
become committed?
if you decide to move forward, you're committed to one of those resolutions, but you're not, those resolutions don't commit you to putting it on the ballot. It's not until the second meeting in July where you pick one of them if you decide to
We
go
could pick
forward.
none of them.
You could pick
of
none
them, or you
Right.
could pick one of them, but you can't pick one that hasn't been
presented
presented.
to the county auditor. So as many options as you would like can be created. They must be certified by the county auditor to come back to you. And prior to August 9th, which is the filing deadline for the Board of Elections, you'd either have to, at your last meeting in July or at a special meeting if you so choose, take public action to adopt a resolution approving one of those prior resolutions to move forward for ballot language purposes. You can choose to do nothing. You can choose to do one of those. You can't create a new option unless it's been certified by the county auditor.
Can I ask an in the weeds question? The technology. Technology, you mentioned some of we've been trying to use long life assets the second time through. What are some of the key things district-wide and maybe from a building perspective?
Mike, do you want to talk? Mr. Voss is here. Come up here. Mr. Voss, Director of Technology, is here. He can tell you honestly about everything that they deal with every single day.
I'm gonna check him. He's in my office every day.
So in terms of technology, if we start district-wide, let's start from the outside and work our way into the building. So on the outside, we have a fiber network. We own our own fiber that connects us to the police department where our internet comes in. It connects our buildings to each other. So that fiber is over a decade old, and the fiber that was installed is good and it works, but it's not the right type of fiber. And what that means is there's 2 types of fiber network. There's multi-mode, single mode. Multi-mode goes over shorter or goes over longer distances and more data, and it gives you more options. Single mode is shorter distances. The type of fiber that's there is a single mode everywhere. And the fiber that connects the high school to the early learning center, that's out of spec. It's too far for single mode. So that fiber throws up errors for us every day. It's not clean data that's going through there, which puts that building at risk of going down and being disconnected from the network. So we manage that the best we can to make things work there. The single mode between the buildings, it is within distance spec, but it limits our routing option. The whole idea of a fiber ring network is if there's a break somewhere, then the data can go a different direction and nobody's down. So it's a ring. But the way that it's set up now, it's set up as a ring, but with all the buildings as an island on the ring, which means if the fiber breaks, the building is isolated and is down. So it defeats the purpose of having a ring network if they're all lateral islands. And that's because of the type of fiber that was installed. We can't route the data in a true ring pattern. So that fiber should be replaced. All of that fiber that's in the ground should be replaced. The fiber that goes from the high school to the K1, in addition to it being the wrong type of fiber, it's just direct buried, which means somebody could go out with a picket, put a sign in the yard and break the fiber. So it should be in conduit, it should be protected so that, and marked, so that it can't be just a stake put in the ground and break the fiber. So that's on the outside. That's connecting the district to the network, to the internet, connecting the buildings to each other so they can talk. Once they're all connected, then we come inside the building. Inside the building, we have switches. So basically the network comes in, is connected to the switch, and then the switches connect every room to each other to the network. We have a problem with the switches because, again, while they work, it's not the best design. And I'll try to give you an analogy of Christmas lights. So you have Christmas lights that are electrically in a series. So if you take one light bulb out, they all go out. Or you have lights that are in parallel. If you take one light bulb out, the rest stay lit. Only the one bulb is out. So parallel circuit is series circuit electrical. The way because of the switches that we have, they're connected as an analogy. It's not exact analogy, but as an analogy, they're connected like a parallel circuit. So if one switch fails to connect a room to the network, the other switches can route around it and everything is good. So that's what in network terms, it's called a spanning tree. So if a switch goes down, we can route around it and only a couple of rooms are out, so the whole building being out. It sounds good, but the problem is if the switch fails in a certain way, that it quits communicating with the other switches, what will happen is it creates a short circuit, a switch loop. So the data goes like this, and it creates then a flood of data on the network, and everything comes down. And that actually happened to us back in April. So we had a switch loop at the high school, the whole network went down. Luckily, it happened at 6 o'clock at night. So nobody was here, nobody noticed it. So what we had to do was we had to fail over to a whole nother backup system just to get the network back up. So what we should do is we should replace all of those switches from what's called a layer 2 switch to a layer 3 switch. And then we can get rid of spanning tree. Each switch then is kind of on its own network so that if it fails, it doesn't interfere with anything else. Only a room or a couple rooms go off the network instead of the whole district coming down because of one switch at the high school. So we go up from the fiber network on the outside to the switches on the inside. Every room, every wireless connection, every port that is in the wall all has a copper cable, that blue cable going to a switch. This building's great, you can follow the blue cable to the closet, all right? So the cables, this particular cable is called Cat6, category 6. It can maintain a certain amount of data in it. But the cables in the walls in the buildings are category 5. They can only handle a lot less data. They can handle a lot less data. All of those cables in the high school, middle school, primary building, early learning center need to be pulled out and replaced with category 6 or category 6E cable. So now we're talking about pulling all the cable and all the walls out so that we can get from the fiber network to the switch closet to the classroom. So those are all different points of failure of getting disconnected from the network. So those are all things that will last a long time, but they just haven't been addressed since the buildings were built. They haven't been addressed. The Wi-Fi is another connectivity point. The primary, the AO, McCoy, this building, and the intermediate building all need updated Wi-Fi. The systems that are in place in those buildings now, this system is antiquated. It's not the best technology that's out there. It's not even middle of the road technology. It's nobody uses it. So, and I don't mean nobody uses it. Have you ever gone to a hotel and you're at a conference and you think, wow, this Wi-Fi is really crappy at the hotel? That's what they use. Okay. So,
Value engineering.
yeah.
Who's got the crappy hotel Wi-Fi?
So those need to be replaced.
New password.
But like the high school, we replaced last summer, Wi-Fi systems, just like all technology, are constantly evolving. So we're probably gonna have to replace it again in 4 years, just because new technology, new ways of connecting, and more devices that the kids are bringing in. So those are all infrastructure things that right now we pick and choose our battles. And then the other biggest one is, and this kind of crosses with maintenance too, is generator. So right now, even if we have all the best switches in the closets, all the best cabling, all the best everything, our closets aren't on generator power. And they're not on battery backup. So if the power goes out, the network comes down. So what should happen is the closets, all the switches should be plugged into a good battery backup that can last for a half hour, give or take, and run everything. So as soon as the power's cut, the battery takes over, nobody notices anything. But then the battery should be plugged into a generator so that the power gets cut, the battery takes over until the generator can take over. And then the battery charges again and everything is good. No one notices anything. Natural gas generator will just keep running forever. So then we're up and good. Right now, there's only a couple closets that are connected to a generator, and hardly any of them have the battery backup in between them, or a battery backup that will last longer than 30 seconds. So the generator won't kick on and take over in 30 seconds. So what happens is the network comes down. That's what led to the problem in April. There was a power outage over the weekend. The batteries depleted, things came down, and they came up when the power came back on in the wrong order. But it didn't throw up any red flags. That caused the one switch at the high school to flake out, which brought the whole district down. All preventable things if you have simple things in place and if you address them over years. So those are all big ticket
Those all
items.
sound like very much like infrastructure, risk reduction, updating things that just with the speed of technology.
I'm sorry.
These are all updates, speed of technology, innovation we got to catch up with.
Yes, these are things that
Is there anything here that's interfacing with the students and the teachers?
everything that I just described, because if any of those things that I just described goes down, then nobody can get on the internet. Nobody could log into a computer. The phones would stop working because the phones are IP phones, they're connected to the network. So if the network goes down, phones are out, internet's out, email's out, obviously, because communication is dead in the district at that point.
With the exception of 911.
Yeah, right. That's,
There's an
yeah,
analog
analog.
line for 911 is
Right.
required.
But to Paul's question though, yeah, to Paul's question, there are, I mean, we're talking about a lot of end of life, computers and other things that need to be replaced. I mean, I've heard this because I've talked with Michael about it too, but just so that the general public knows, I think it's to talk about how important having the network available, because our kids are coming to school every day and they have all kinds of technology on them. I mean, how many devices are actually connecting to the network here? So
at the high school, it's the only place that I have good metrics for that, because the other places have them. But the high school, on average, there's about 2,600 to 3,000 devices on the high school network every day. So about 1,800 of those are personal devices. Out of those, about 600 are actual computers. So the rest are phones and or tablets that are on the network. They run about 8 terabytes of data every day on average. So that's a ton of data that's going, or I should say that's per week. So that's a ton of data that's going back and forth for learning that's going on. So a lot of the end of life devices that are in the students' hands, A lot of those would be Chromebooks. Some are going to be some laptops and some iPads and other tablets. So if we have the permanent improvement, then the general fund doesn't have to be spent on battery backups, switches, Wi-Fi, those types of things. The general fund can be dedicated to things like Chromebooks. So those wouldn't be permanent improvement dollars because they wouldn't last 5 years, and the dollar amount per device is lower. Those are more like a supply than a permanent improvement. But the problem we have now is we're taking general fund to pay for permanent improvement items, which means we can't replace the end of life devices in the kids' hands because we're trying to address both at the same time. So what it does is it frees up the general fund to purchase devices. So just as quick numbers, according to just kind of standards that we've set, a desktop should last about 6 or 7 years. So if we were to replace every desktop in the district that is 7 years old or older, so now just imagine that you're using a 7-year-old desktop, and these are 7-year-old desktops that aren't named brands. These were built with generic parts 7 years ago. If we were to replace all of those 7-year-old devices, that's 365 desktops that need to be replaced this year. But because we had to spend general fund money on some infrastructure things, we can only replace 65 of those 365 desktops. So now each year that gap just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you extrapolate that down, or just keep going down with laptops, and then with Chromebooks. We can't replace what should be replaced based on the life cycle of that device, because we're spending money on other things that are higher ticket items. So because of that, each year the gap in the devices that we need to replace gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we'll never catch up.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I appreciate that. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Detail. I'm glad you brought him up.
No, but it's, again, I think
The reality.
Yeah,
my view is that that's all infrastructure stuff. It goes out of date quickly. And really what I'm excited about is the interface with the student and teacher, and investments need to be made there to really make this world-class going forward. So it's helpful to know that what we're up against.
Michael, not to go down a rabbit trail, but if there were more dollars available in the general revenue fund to purchase this type of technology, and because we know that the kids, these are just extensions of kids these days, maybe not laptops, but their phones or their iPads, whatever. Has there been discussion amongst the administration about providing one-to-one devices?
We've actually had the conversations as a leadership team. We've floated it through a tech committee with some teachers within the school district. We've even thought about trying to introduce, and it's variable or variance based upon the age, we use a Chromebook. A Chromebook may be the solution. I mean, clearly we use it for state testing because of the platform that's required, but beyond that, it may be the solution that's most appropriate for early learners within the school district that are probably grades 2 or 3 through probably 6 or 7, maybe 6. Once you hit the 8th grade threshold, you're into a different type of laptop based upon the work that you're typically doing in the academic realm. So Chromebook may not be your solution. So then you need a more high-priced, ultimately, laptop that you could look at. We've tried to actually we've been brainstorming because we're trying to come up, right now I don't have the money because we're spending it on infrastructure. Do we try to institute something where it would become part of a fee structure, that it's a lease purchase from the parent, that we're actually trying to offset part of the district expenditure? And I'll just use a Chromebook as an example. A Chromebook generally has a life cycle of 4 years. That's what it does. So if you would get that Chromebook when you entered, hypothetically, 5th grade, and you kept it through 8th grade before you hit the high school, in that 4 years, could you be charged a fee to offset the district expenditure of that piece of technology? And then talk about the other fee structures within the school district. We've been exploring, trying to figure out creative solutions that if we went to our parents and said, if we did a lease purchase agreement, because we can purchase a higher end Chromebook with everything that needs to be on it, and it technically will belong to your child at the end of 4 years. Are you willing to buy it outright or pay for it as you go through the 4-year process to basically then offset that expenditure for the school district so we can get you the better piece of technology that your actually teachers need, or if you don't bring one? Because we have a lot of kids that do bring a piece of technology to the school. And Mike talked about the high school dominantly. That's where we see the majority of the devices. Our early learning center next year is going to have all iPads. So we're taking the iPads across the school district and we're collecting them and we're putting that in as the technology structure for what that experience will be at the ELC for pre-KK. The primary school will have strictly Chromebooks. So we're actually in the process of reorganizing how we're using technology, but we're trying to find creative solutions to your question. So it's not just a district expenditure. You know, if we do the ask to the parent, we say, this is the piece of technology that would benefit us the most for your child in this classroom, but we can't have the haves and the have-nots. If we're going to institute it, then we have to give every kid the opportunity to have access to it if we expect teachers to use it with fidelity as a learning tool. Because to arm half the room with it and half the room without, we're not solving our problem. So we would be interested in a one-to-one, but we can't currently afford it as a school district without permanent improvement dollars to be available.
On a related topic, as it relates to technology, do we have a written data retention and disaster recovery plan?
Come to the microphone.
You don't have to describe it. We can cover that at another time. That would be fine.
So there is a data retention plan that usually goes through the fiscal department. So it spells out what type of data has to be kept for so long. So that is in place. Disaster recovery. So there's two components to that. There's actually recovering the data. And right now there is that in place. We are backing up all of our data, all of our server data, all of our user data that's stored on the file server. So that is backed up every day. The second part of that's continuity. So it's one thing to be able to recover the data, but it's another thing to actually be able to run off of your backup when your primary goes down. So right now we do have continuity in place also. So if our primary servers go down, we can run off of our backup server. Not every system, but the critical systems can run off of that. The only problem with it is our disaster recovery, both in terms of data recovery and continuity, is in the intermediate building. So if there was a true disaster in the district, more than likely the high school and the intermediate building would be taken out, and then we wouldn't have data backup or continuity. Ideally, we'd want to have that off-site somewhere else so that we could run. So we do have it, but it's not off-site.
We should just discuss that in more detail. I unfortunately have experience with disaster recovery.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions?
Thank
We
you.
will follow up with you individually. We did give you the draft of the resolution. Please review all the information. We're happy to answer questions when we talk to you in between this board meeting and the next, but we will contact you individually for conversation or have pair meetings if you so choose. We'll speak with John and find out what the board chooses to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Opportunity for public participation, and we have no one this evening. So may I have a motion for superintendent's items? And I believe we can take all of them at one time. So A1 and including the addendum, correct. So thank you.
Second.
Mr. Newmoff and Mr. Bush. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClellan. Board of Education members, for personnel this evening, there's standard employee action items that you generally would see at all of your meetings, from resignations to new hires to substitute approval. I'll highlight just summer Bridges as the example. The math adoption that's been previously approved is now working through its way for implementation for this coming fall. One of the action items in personnel this evening is the approval of the professional development for learning that's taking place across the school's campus. We've had teachers on campus actually beginning Monday this week. So although school just ended, teachers are back. They're doing the professional development and curriculum work that's necessary to greet our students when they return in August. Beyond that, the only other highlight I would say, and it's really to echo the prior comments, is action item number 12 for the approval of the Plain Local Education Association new agreement that has been reached. And really my commendations to Joe Armpriester in particular. team and the association for ratifying the contract, and we're hopeful that you will approve it this evening for adoption to the school district. Letter B is general business items specifically for some technology purchases based upon specific work that we're trying to do and or the new equipment that we're trying to purchase for next year based upon available funds. Beyond that, it's the employee children to work that's agreeable pursuant to the terms and conditions of the negotiated agreement. Letter C is purchase service agreement this evening, specifically to benefit Marburn Academy now that we are their fiscal agent. And letter D is the board resolution to approve our membership into the Ohio High School Athletic Association, which is an annual requirement for our students to be eligible to participate in interscholastic sports in grades 7 through 12. Are there any questions?
With no questions, then I will ask for the roll call, please.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes. Now, Mr. Armpriester, if I could veer off the agenda for a minute.
I actually wasn't really planning on speaking tonight, but since you asked, I'm more than happy to address the board. So President McClelland, Vice President Darrow, and fellow board members, thank you very much for also approving the new contractual agreement between the board and the association, the certificated teachers. As Mr. Darrow pointed out, I truly do believe this is a partnership, and it was a collaboration between the parties to work and listen to each other and try to focus on the things that can continue to move our district forward and what we're trying to do, which is focus on student achievement and being fiscally responsible. I truly do believe that this is a very fair agreement, as witnessed by a large majority of our membership who voted to approve and ratify the agreement. I think it focused on really what the association's most important piece financially is to remain competitive, to attract teachers, but also focus on the longevity piece, to encourage teachers to stay and reap the benefits of the back end of the schedule. We had seen for many, many years that we would attract people, we would come in, we'd put our heart and souls into professionally developing them, and then see them leave after 5, 6, 7 years in the district. And I do believe that this new agreement actually does just what we were hoping for it to do, to let them see the wonderfulness that we offer here in New Albany, but then also see through the longevity piece of it that we are very competitive now, and we will be able to attract and retain people for the long haul. And so I truly believe this is a great agreement. I'm glad that we were able to get through this process. Again, as Mr. Darrow pointed out, it was a struggle, but it was for a common good, that we were both working to find something that we both believed and could fully support, and I believe we've accomplished that. So again, thank you very much for your vote of confidence, and we definitely look forward to continuing to work. I actually also wanted to point out to Mr. Newmoff's point that we have embedded in this contract several different committees, joint committees by which we work together to try to resolve and solve things, including the new language related to class size and class composition. But the other committees that we already have in place, our insurance committee and our performance pay incentive, and just several things across the line. And so we always have viewed it as a partnership. We've always wanted to work as partners towards the common goal of improving student achievement. So with that, I thank you, and I appreciate everything that you do as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
And on that fine note, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Darrow,
Second.
Skalnowski. Roll call, please.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski. Yes. Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes, we are adjourned. Our next meeting, Monday, June 26th, right here at 6:30. Thank you.